Hi, I started this video immediately after ending the handshake one. So, I believe it was called Unus Annus. If it's not, then I'll revise myself. So, it's not major at all, because I don't really have creepy things happen to me. But I am delusionally psychotic, so sometimes I have hallucinations and shit. And those aren't usually scary, but sometimes they are. And God, my hair is so gross right now. Hold on, let me do what I do for my yoga Zoom meetings, because I'm taking yoga for my PE class. Make my hair look all kinds of delightful and stylish and trendy. There we go. Man, that is a classic look. Okay, anyway. So the first time, I remember thinking back on things from my childhood whenever I, learned that I was, I had hallucinations, and explained some odd events that happened whenever I was younger. Like, one of them, there's two that really stand out, and I'm sure that there's more that I just don't remember because they didn't really affect me that much. But there's two that did stand out, and one of them was, the first one, the one that wasn't scary, was when I had come home from a car ride, and I love car rides, I still do. I love sticking my head out the window like a puppy and having the wind, and it's just, I love going fast. It's just a very, puppy dog brain kind of thing. And I looked in the mirror, and I was like, my hair was blown back, my face was flushed. It was just like, I was just living the best life I could as a kid. But my eyes, which are usually, it's hard to tell, but they're like a kind of grayish, dark hazel green. They were like bright yellow. And I looked at myself, and I noticed that because it was like otherworldly yellow. And I blinked, and in surprise, and it went back to normal. And at that time, I thought, just like, does wind do that to eyes? Like, that was the thought connection that my brain made. It's just like, I guess I got so much wind that it changed my eye color. I was younger. I probably would have made that assessment, now, if I didn't know I was delusional, honestly, because, like, what other explanation could there be, correlation versus causation and all that. But, and then, of course, was the whole, whenever I grew up, the whole thing about people saying just like, oh, my eyes change color all the time, versus people just like, no, they don't, you fucking bitch. So I never really brought that up ever again, because I was just like, that happened to me. But everyone says that it doesn't happen, really, and everyone who tries to say that it does happen are kind of like snowflakey. So I got nervous, but now I know it's almost certainly because I was hallucinating. The other one from my childhood that does stand out is actually the source of not a phobia, not at all near phobia levels. I actually don't mind it that much anymore, but it started a fear of mirrors in me for a very long time. And I was, I'm a writer now, just like I was back then. And I would write little anecdotes about my reflection in the mirror. And sometimes they were like cute, and how my, reflection was like my best friend. But other times it seemed like my reflection wanted to like kill me. Like, it felt, good God, I'm so sorry. I feel like this story is pretty common in literature now that I know more about the theme, but I thought that my reflection was resentful of the fact that I was out here and it was in there, and it just wanted me out of the picture so that it could live the life that it wanted to live, kind of thing. And that all started because I was in my old bedroom, and I had this giant fucking vanity dresser set, and it was really pretty. It was white, very very royal like, and had a massive mirror, and I can't remember what I was doing. It doesn't really matter, just like I just remember the pretenses of the other story, because they kind of did matter with, my thought process at the time. But I was just doing something that involved me looking into my vanity mirror, and it was a similar situation to the other event, whereas I saw something in the mirror and it wasn't what was really there, and I blinked and then it was gone. Only this time it was terrifying because it was just, it's not like your average, horrible jump scare, grotesque monstrosity kind of thing. It was just extremely uncanny, which was enough for me. And it was my reflection looking back at me, and I don't know if I can like copy the expression that it had. I've never tried, but it was looking at me with like this really evil, malevolent sneer, I guess it's safe to say. And I feel like its eyebrows were furrowed, and it was just like promising me horrible things were coming my way, and kind of like a foreboding look of like lethal malice. It's really hard to explain it, and I'm not gonna like try. I get distracted by the fucking unicorn thing. It's hard to describe, but yeah. And then I blinked, and whenever I opened my eyes again, it was just the image of me staring back at myself, and I was just looking horrified in the reflection, just as I'm sure I did in real life. So that hallucination started a fear of mirrors that kind of persisted for a long time. But that, it was always something that was on the back of my mind. It never really, like, was a problem. Like, how after you watch, like, a scary movie or some shit, and you're, like, looking in the mirror of your bathroom, you're just like, God, something's going to appear behind me, that kind of thing. It was just something that was in the back of my mind. And then scary hallucinations that have happened recently. There was one time I had sleep paralysis, and this actually, like, it's not scary to hear about, but it was terrifying whenever it happened, and it kind of started like a descent into really bad mental health place for me, which eventually ended up with me being hospitalized. And I know that wasn't like the cause for it, because it was just, typical sleep paralyzation, but it was like the moment when I realized, I know that sleep paralyzation happens to a lot of people, but at that time I was just like, it made my diagnosis a lot more real, and made me realize just like, I do hallucinate. That's really scary. And then I just kind of like went downhill from there. But I'm fine now. No need to feel sorry. But the hallucination it wasn't a hallucination really, like it was just sleep paralysis. I was in bed, obviously, and I was woken up by the sound of someone knocking at the front door. And it's important to know how my house is laid out, because, okay, so I'll try to do this on the camera. So there's my bedroom. It's very, very small. And then right next to it is the hallway that leads to the main room over here. And right up there is the door. So the door and where I am. And then there's the living room. And then there's this weird area that's not quite the living room, not quite the kitchen. And then way over here is my parents' room. And so that kind of comes into play later, because if I had to leave my room to get to my parents, I would be right smack dab in front of the front door. So there was just knocking, and so I was woken up by this, and I'm not easy to rouse from sleep, so I guess I was just really shocked because they weren't doing it loudly, and I was like looking outside, and like, it was completely pitch. And I was just like, what fucking time is it? Who the hell is at the door? And of course, my first thought, my first thought, obviously. I was confused, I was sleepy. And then, like, scenarios started running through my brain. And I was just like, are they lost? Are they running from someone? Are they hurt? Is someone else hurt? Are they trying to get help? And, of course, I didn't realize I was paralyzed at the time because I didn't actually try to move. A lot of people say that whenever they're in sleep paralysis, they try to move, but they can't. But I was actually, like, frozen with fear. So I assume, like, I guess it could have been, like, a normal hallucination because I didn't actually try to move, so I didn't have any proof that I was actually paralyzed until I woke up and I realized just like that must have been what it was, but I didn't try to move. And so like those thoughts were coursing through my head, and I was just like, I need to like do something about this. But then I was just like, but what if they're dangerous? What if they're trying to get in to hurt us? And then I was just like, but what kind of dangerous person would be knocking instead of just breaking in? And it was just like all these thoughts that are conflicting and, you know, scary, and just like, what should I do? Should I stay? Should I go get them? Should I go get my parents? Should I like call someone? All of that nonsense. And then like the knocking was getting louder, and, you know, at first it was just don't really want to use my iPad, but it was like, that's not very good at all, is it? It was just like normal knocking. And then it started getting like, I don't want to use my iPad. It just started getting louder. Like they were knocking a lot harder. Excuse me. And it started getting louder and like faster. Like they were getting a lot more desperate or angry. And then it got to the point where it sounded like they were like really, really fucking going at it. And then it sounded like they had both of their hands and were beating against the door with it. And at that point, I was absolutely horrified, because I was just, at that point, I was so scared that my victim mode set in, and I was just like, this isn't someone who needs, sorry, back to that old game, huh? This isn't someone who needs help, this is someone who wants to get in to hurt us. And, which is like, you know, a very human thing to think, because whenever, I didn't even think about it until now whenever I'm saying it out loud, but just like, in consideration, it could have been someone who's just desperate to get in and get away from something. But I was just too scared to think like that. And so I was thinking just like, I have to get to my parents' room, because my stepfather owns protective arms, and they'd be able to protect me. I'm completely defenseless, completely away from them. I don't have anything to defend myself with. And from now, ever since then, I've been sleeping with the metal bat next to my bed. But, and of course, then I was just thinking, but just like, but if I get out and I try to get across to them, then they could like bust the door down right as I'm in front of it. And that was absolutely a no-go. And so I was strategizing it to myself. And I was thinking just like, should I stay? Should I go? And I was still mulling it over whenever the knocking stopped. And I didn't hear anything. I didn't hear any movement to suggest this. But then I was lying there, and I was just realized with like a horrifying sensation, just like, they're right fucking in front of my window, and they're looking in at me. And I was thinking to myself just like, it's fine. It's totally dark. I'm under the covers. There's a lot between me and them. Visually, they won't be able to see me. They won't know that I'm there. And eventually I fell back asleep. And that was, I wouldn't say the scariest thing to happen to me, because there are times whenever I've like nearly died, but like adrenaline keeps you from feeling scared in those moments. Like a time where I was nearly like bisected by train doors by these horrible fucking conductors. That's a story for another day, I guess. But I was just absolutely, I was petrified. I was completely petrified, because, you know, I've lived a really safe life, and I've never had to feel in danger for my safety, which I'm infinitely grateful for. And I never want to, you know, take that for granted. But at that time, I was just like thinking to myself, just like, someone could hurt me right now. Like, someone could hurt me, they could kill me. They could like do horrible things to me, and I could die. Even though it was just, you know, a fabrication. It was just a hallucination. And that was that. And the other scary hallucination happened years later, and I was like doing a lot better. It was post-hospitalization. It was, you know, I had a different psychiatrist, I had different medicine, but I was slipping into a delusional state. And usually, always actually, I don't slip into manic delusional states and hallucinate at the same time. This time I did. And You could tell I was being delusional because I was sending messages to my QPP and I was rambling, and it was, whenever I look back to try and like read what I was going through my head at the time, it's completely incomprehensible. Like, it was almost like I was drunk texting, and I drunk text hard. and um but I know that I was talking about fractals, like geometric fractals, and how we're nothing but fractals. And something about the mind's eye, something about that. But I know because I still feel very kind of like a, not a religious kind of feeling about fractals, but it's very common for delusional people. As far as I've seen, I don't have any scientific proof to back this up, but from what I've seen, it's common for delusional people to get really attached to mathematic or scientific equations and make it like their entire ideology. And I can think of two cases off the top of my head. There's the time cube, and there's, I can't even remember his name, the time cube fellow, very pleasant man. And the woman who sent all those text messages to the guy she met on Tinder and was saying how she wanted to wear his skin, and how whenever they were questioning her, I can't remember, it was an Einstein equation, I think, and how she was just, it was a mathematical statement, and how this and this and this equals life, which equals love, and that's why she was so obsessed with love. And I wish I had researched this before I figured I would bring this up, because now I just sound like a rambling fool. But yeah, so that was whenever I realized, just that was another very solidifying experience, just with the knocking person. It was like, man, I truly am, I truly do hallucinate. With this one, it was more like, I truly am delusional. And so I had to force myself, because I was on the floor of the living room, and it was 1 a.m. and I was down there for an hour, just sending off these incoherent ramblings to my QPP. And I finally realized, just I have to stop. If I get up and I go to bed and I go to sleep, I'll wake up and it'll be better. So I had in the back of my mind, there was sense to, stop this. And so I got up, and this is where the format of my house kind of comes in play again, because up here, as I said before, is my parents' room. But right down here is our second living room, and that's where I was. And then, as I said, just there's that awkward kitchen, not kitchen area in front of my parents' room, and next to the living room, the hallway, and then my room. So I had to go throughout there in the darkness while I was extremely delusional to get to my room. And there were so many shadow people, and they were watching me. And they also, it's really hard to explain this. They also, it's like recalling a dream. They were watching me, but they also weren't watching me. And they didn't have faces. They didn't even have human forms, but they were people. They were in the shape of fractals, which is of course an impossibility in of itself. And they were, sorry, they were watching me, but they weren't watching me. And that's because they were in a different state of being than I was. So they were watching me and judging me because they were in a higher state of being, but they were also watching me and judging me because I was in a higher state of being than them. But they also weren't malevolent in any way, and they didn't consider me in any way. They didn't care about me, even though they didn't like me and that they were jealous of me. And it was just all of that shit. Because whenever I get delusional, this happens normally, but I can contain it. I'm pretty sure that's just how it is with a lot of people. They feel so many things and think so many things, and there's so many conflicting sensations that they don't know what to do with it. But a lot of people are just they can handle it, And I can handle it too. Sometimes it gets overwhelming and I don't quite know what to do and I have to like take a break and just defrazzle myself. But whenever I'm delusional, it's my entire world at that moment. So I was just thinking, just like, I almost, it felt like no time at all had passed and that I had been walking through there for hours at the same time. And I finally got back to my room, and I always pee before bed because I drink constantly and I have the bladder of someone who drinks constantly. And so I went to the bathroom and I was also dreading it because I would walk by a mirror. And I was actually like it's really hard to explain what happened because I was like sleepwalking basically. I was hanging outside of the bathroom between my room. I can't even remember what happened. I had a lot of hesitance going into the bathroom, and I can't remember exactly what I did because nothing is quite linking up in my brain that makes it seem like just like, yeah, that's exactly what happened. But I did it, and I refused to look at the mirror. I would not. I thought just like if I looked at the mirror, I would just, I'm so sorry. I don't know why this is going off right now. It's been 2 a.m. But I felt like if I looked at the mirror, I would see something that would just not kill me, but like show me things I didn't want to see. Put in extreme simplicity, because I don't know how else to explain it. But then eventually, I did all my stuff. I got into bed. I cuddled with my stuffed animals. And my thoughts kept on worrying, but I had put a stop to them myself, which is more than I would have been able to do in the past. And I went to sleep. And I woke up in the morning. I was so tired. And that was like the worst delusional manic episode I've ever had. Like, the only other significant one that I had, this one isn't really scary, but basically it was the same thing. I was texting my QPP and I just kind of went fucking off. And it was, because I have problems with differentiating dreams from reality. So to not get into it too much, because this is 22 minutes as it is, basically the video size limit is almost reached. Oh, my battery is running low. Okay, I'll stop this here. So that's my entry basically for Unus Annus. So I had one more thing to say, but it's not super interesting. It just happened recently. Basically, someone who was either lost or drunk or both was ringing the apartment's doorbell at 1 a.m. and 12 a.m. And it was very frightening because, in quarantine, in where I am at the moment, cops aren't responding to minor crimes. So whoever was at the door could have easily gotten in and, taken everything and left, and the cops wouldn't call unless they hurt us. So it's really cool times we live in right now. So that's it. Thank you. And sorry for the length of the video, but I have to cut it off now. Momento Mori, Unus Annus.